In the vastness of the Roman Empire, where justice was handed down through swords and decrees, one name began to vanish from official records, not due to a lack of importance, but because of shame. Decades earlier, this man held in his hands the fate of the most innocent of all men and chose silence, cowardice, and convenience. His name was Lucius Pontius Pilate, and this is the story of his downfall, his pain, and his possible spiritual awakening, wrapped for centuries in mist, disgrace, and mystery. Pilate was not born great. The son of a mid-tier imperial servant family, he grew up in a small town near Capua. From an early age, he observed power with fascination. Power solved problems, gave orders, silenced opposition, and he wanted to be part of that. Not for justice, but for ambition. By the time he was in his early 30s, he had already climbed the ranks of Rome's administrative elite. When he was sent to the province of Judea, he was seen as a man capable of imposing order where Rome saw only unrest. But Judea was not like other provinces. Its people held a deep, unshakable faith, and Pilate never understood that. He saw fanaticism where there was devotion, resistance where there was hope. His governance was marked by tension, impositions, and disdain for the locals' beliefs. He didn't see a people, only a problem to be controlled. Until one day, they brought before him a strange man, silent, wounded, yet serene, someone who did not fear him, even in the face of death. That encounter lasted less than a morning, but would echo for all eternity. It was the day of preparation for the Jewish Passover. Jerusalem was uneasy, and among the crowds, priests, soldiers, and rumors, Jesus of Nazareth was brought before him. Pilate, a seasoned politician, quickly saw the trap. The local leaders wanted blood but not responsibility. They used Roman authority to carry out their religious revenge. Pilate tried, through empty gestures, to escape the responsibility. He washed his hands before the people as if that would erase what he was doing. But the gesture did not cleanse his soul. On the contrary, it stained his conscience forever. Years passed. Pilate's political career held on for a while, but slowly fell apart. His inflexible posture and increasing brutality eroded his reputation with his superiors. An uprising in Samaria was the breaking point. His reaction was excessively violent. The result, he was removed from office. Just past 50 years old, Pilate was dismissed from the province and summoned to Rome. But before reaching the capital, he received unexpected news. Emperor Tiberius was dead. The new regime in Rome didn't want to deal with old scandals. Pilate's name was a problem, and so he was silenced. He was sent to a distant region at the foot of the Gallic Mountains, a quiet exile without trial, without honors, without return. His wife Claudia refused to accompany him. She had strange dreams before Jesus' death and afterward drew close to the first Christian communities. She said she could no longer live under the same roof as the man who had condemned the righteous one. Pilate went alone. Only an elderly freedman followed him. And so began his second trial, the trial of silence, guilt, and solitude. In the damp, cold village where he was forced to live, he became something of a ghost. The locals knew little about him, just that he was a disgraced Roman. But at night, the echo of his screams seeped through the thin walls. He was often seen wandering by the riverbank in the dead of night, dipping his hands into the icy water. Some said he mumbled in strange tongues, as if speaking to ghosts. Others claimed he conversed with someone unseen, but what frightened most was the void in his eyes, as if he carried an abyss inside, and in that abyss the name of Jesus echoed, not as an accusation, but as a persistent memory. The serene face, the calm gaze, the absence of fear. Pilate couldn't understand how that man about to die still radiated peace. that gaze haunted him. It was not hatred, it was compassion, and that's what tortured him the most. My brother, my sister, if this story is stirring something in you, pause with me for a moment. Let me make a sincere request. If this narrative is opening a wound in your heart or awakening memories that time hasn't erased, write in the comments. Write the name of someone you've been praying for. Someone like Pilate, who needs to understand that truth cannot be avoided. That salvation doesn't come through clean hands, but through a repentant heart. And if you feel that this mission should reach more hearts, subscribe now to this channel. But not out of obligation. Do it because you want to walk with us through stories that awaken, heal, and convert. This channel is built on prayer, effort, and truth. Be part of it. Winters in Gaul were long, gray, and merciless. Pilate, now nearing 60, felt the weight of time on his shoulders. But it was the past that truly bent his soul. His residence was modest. A damp stone house with simple furniture and no symbol of his former status. No more Roman standards, no rows of servants, no guards at the door, only him, the old freedman, and the constant sound of wind blowing through the hills. The power he once held now seemed like a distant illusion. And even if he could go back in time, he knew that the most important moment of his life wasn't in a Senate hearing, but in that silent gaze inside the Antonia fortress. During the day, he wandered aimlessly, gathering dry leaves, watching the river flow lazily over stones, as if the world there was made for forgetting. But Pilate's mind would not forget. He tried to find peace in routine, but everything was interrupted by memories. The trial of Jesus returned like a constant whisper. The words spoken and unspoken, the silence that screamed louder than the religious leaders. The question that he never answered: what is truth? Before, he thought it was just rhetorical. Now, more and more, he realized it was the key to everything. One afternoon, he received a visitor, a merchant from Asia Minor who recognized Pilate by his face and the name still mentioned among the Christians. Without fear, the man shared stories he'd heard in Antioch. He spoke of communities gathering in catacombs, of people healing in Jesus' name, of apostles preaching boldly before emperors. Even here there are those who follow him, said the traveler. Pilate, restless, could not understand how someone condemned and executed like a criminal could inspire such devotion. But what disturbed him most was a phrase from the merchant. They do not hate you, sir. They pray for you. They repeat your name in their creed, suffered under Pontius Pilate. Those words struck like lightning. He, who had tried to escape all blame, was now cited daily as part of that man's story, engraved into the heart of a faith that was growing even in the shadows, not as a hero, but as a symbol of cowardice, and at the same time as an inevitable piece of a plan that would change the world. After that, Pilate withdrew for days. He refused food, spoke little, reread the few scrolls he had brought from Rome. He began writing on wax tablets, then on improvised parchments. He wrote not to justify himself, but to understand. It was as if each line were an attempt to decipher the enigma of that Galilean. The old freedman, who served him quietly, claimed to see him weeping while he wrote. He wept not from fear of death, but from not yet understanding life. On a spring night he had a strange dream. He walked through Jerusalem, but everything was silent. No footsteps, no voices, no animals, only the echo of his own thoughts. Suddenly he stood again in the praetorium. And there was Jesus, not wounded, not bound, but dressed in white, eyes fixed on him. Pilate tried to speak, but no words came, only tears. And Jesus smiled, a smile full of pain, yet also compassion. Then he extended his hand. Pilate awoke with his hand stretched out as well, but into nothing. That dream didn't leave him for days. He began walking by the riverside, repeating one single phrase: "If only I had one more chance." But he didn't know that a chance might already be before him. God sometimes reveals his mercy through small things, in the silence of exile, in the presence of someone unexpected. And that's what happened days later. An elderly man, dark-skinned and tired-eyed, arrived in the village. His name was Nathanael, from a Jewish colony in Lusitania. He had heard of a former Roman governor living there, consumed by remorse. He brought with him a scroll containing excerpts from the letters of Peter and James and asked to speak with Pilate. At first, the ex-prefect refused, but curiosity won. He received the visitor and spent hours listening in silence. The man spoke of a kingdom without swords, of forgiveness that couldn't be bought, of a Messiah who conquered death. Then he told how, even after denying the Master 3 times, Peter was welcomed. "He always welcomes the one who repents," he said. That phrase rooted itself in Pilate's hardened heart, like a seed in the desert. For the first time, he didn't feel only guilty, but possibly forgiven, not as a Roman official, but as a wounded soul, as a man. My dear brother, my dear sister, if you've made it this far, let me tell you something with an open heart. There is no exile too distant, no guilt too old that God's love cannot reach. Comment below. Do you carry something in your life like a burden? Write it down. It can be a word, a name, a prayer. You're not alone. This channel is not just a space for videos, but a home for souls returning to the Father. Let's walk together. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I invite you, walk with us. Each new video is a light in someone's darkness, maybe in yours. Subscribe, not because it's trendy, but because here, faith is real, and so is mercy. The weeks following the encounter with Nathanael were different. There was something new in Pilate's expression. The restlessness remained, but now mixed with a quiet kind of hope. For the first time in decades, he seemed to be hearing something beyond the screams of the past. Perhaps the voice of a calling. He began to reread the words Nathanael had left, excerpts that spoke of faith, of deeds, of humility, of a truth that liberates not by force, but by love. Those words brought discomfort, but also stirred curiosity. Who was this man who had died before him, and even in death still spoke so loudly? One morning, during a solitary walk, Pilate crossed paths with a group of Christian travelers from Hispania. They had stopped to rest near the river. Pilate, on impulse, approached. One of them, an older man, noticed him and smiled. "You are the man from the trial," he said, not as an accusation, just as recognition. Pilate tried to leave but was interrupted. "Do not be afraid. The Lord already knew you would make that decision, and even then he looked at you with compassion." The ex-prefect stood frozen. That sentence opened a wound, but also offered balm. They spoke for hours. They talked about the cross as redemption, not defeat, of wounds as healing, of the wood as a bridge. Pilate listened in silence, immersed in shame and thirst. At the end, one of the travelers, a woman with a soft voice, handed him a small object wrapped in cloth, a wooden cross carved by hand. "Keep this. One day you'll know what to do with it." He nodded quietly. That night, he slept with the crucifix beside his bed, and for the first time in many years, he dreamed of peace. Days passed. Pilate began writing again, but now in a different tone. No more justifications or political explanations, but confessions, acknowledgments. He wrote about how he felt fear in front of a defenseless man, how he was swayed by outside voices, interests, pressure. "I did not choose evil because I loved wickedness," he wrote, "but because I feared losing what I had gained, and I ended up losing what truly mattered." His words, once filled with reason, now came filled with soul. Pilate's health, however, began to fail. His long walks lessened, fever became more frequent, and yet there was a strange light in his eyes, as if, even in the end, He was seeing what he had never seen. The freedman who served him said the old master now mumbled prayers that seemed improvised, but rang true. Not formal invocations from imperial cults, but heartfelt cries from someone who finally saw himself small before the eternal. One afternoon, when he could no longer rise from bed, Pilate asked for ink and parchment. He wrote with trembling yet steady hands. If these words are ever read, let it be known that the man who washed his hands once tried to wash his heart, and found in his weakness the only truth worth proclaiming. And at the bottom of the letter, he drew the small wooden cross, the one now resting on his chest. My brothers and sisters, what are we learning from this story? That power turns to dust, that pride becomes ashes, but true repentance, that is gold before God. Do you know someone who once failed and never had the courage to return to faith? Mention that name in the comments. Do it like one planting a seed. Who knows, this video might be the water that makes it grow. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, now is the time. Not to support the channel, but to become part of a community that prays, feels, and walks together. Every story here is told with reverence and devotion, and you are welcome on this path of faith, truth, and redemption. The final months of Pilate's life were wrapped in silence, not the silence of wounded pride or bitter loneliness, but a sacred kind of silence, like that which comes before a great revelation. Fever consumed him slowly, and the village doctors said there was little left to do. The freedman, loyal until the end, kept the house in order and read aloud the letters once given by Nathanael and the travelers. Pilate no longer replied with full sentences, but his eyes filled with tears at certain words. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. It was as if his heart, finally, had found shelter. One night, as snow covered the rooftops and the wind howled like an ancient lament through the mountains, Pilate asked that the crucifix be placed in his hands. I don't know who he is fully, but I know I was never the same after I saw him. These were his final words before slipping into a deep sleep that, according to the freedman, lasted 3 days. On the morning of the 3rd day, he briefly awoke, smiled, and breathed his last. He died in peace, not like he lived, not like he condemned. His death was serene, silent, with no procession or honors. But something in that small house in Vienna seemed touched by something far greater. The freedman, moved and faithful to a promise made years before, gathered Pilate's writings, letters, confessions, reflections. Some were given to Christian travelers. Others were preserved as relics in small communities in southern Gaul. Over time, stories began to circulate. Some said Pilate died a Christian. Others claimed he had visions before death. There were even those who said that his name, once a symbol of guilt, began to be whispered in prayers as a sign that no one is beyond divine mercy. But perhaps the most surprising thing came from Rome. Years after his death, rumors of the ex-prefect's writings reached persecuted Christians. An old bishop, moved by the story, wrote in one of his sermons, "If even Pilate could weep before the truth, why not us? If the man who washed his hands dared to face his soul before dying, perhaps there is still time for me and for you." That sentence was repeated in prayer circles, as if a door had opened, not to exalt Pilate, but to remind us that conversion is possible, even in the final breath. Today, centuries later, the name Pontius Pilate is still remembered in every mass, every creed, every testimony of faith. Suffered under Pontius Pilate. A phrase that echoes not as a condemnation of one man, but as a reminder that our lives always cross paths with the truth, and it's up to us to decide what to do when that happens. Pilate chose fear, then silence, then the search, and perhaps finally, faith. And that's why his story still lives. Dear friend, sister, or brother, as you listen to this story, what touches your heart? Share it in the comments. What did you learn from Pilate's journey? Have you ever felt like it was too late? like there was no turning back? Tell your story. Maybe it will inspire someone else who feels like they're at the end of the road. This space is ours. It belongs to the community. And every story you share here may be the breath of life someone else needs. Now, with deep affection, I invite you. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, come. But come as someone who finds shelter, a home where faith is told with truth, pain, and hope. Every subscription here is like lighting a new flame, and together we light up more paths, paths of reconciliation, healing, and new beginnings. May God bless you. May the peace of the risen Christ rest upon your home, and may each of us, like Pilate, learn, even if late, that truth is not an idea. Truth is a person, and he calls us by name.